All righty, we will go ahead and get started. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Rachel Johnson Farias, and I am the founding executive director of ESQ Apprentice. Welcome to everyone. As I mentioned, happy Black History Month. Want to take a second to acknowledge and recognize that we have and continue to benefit from the occupation and use of Indigenous land, and so therefore have a responsibility to acknowledge our Indigenous community members. So I'm coming to you from Chumash land and want to just recognize that the Chumash community, the Chumash nation is still here and thriving like so many other of our Indigenous nations in the US. So we honor the land we come to you on. As I mentioned, my name is Rachel Johnson Farias, Executive Director, Founding Executive Director of ESQ Apprentice. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about our work at ESQ Apprentice, where we are closing the women's wealth gap, one apprentice lawyer at a time. So we're going to cover a few things today. I'll give a brief apprenticeship history nationally, very brief, of the history of studying or reading the law. Then I'll go into legal apprenticeship today, what it looks like in California, and how our program approaches the legal apprenticeship path. And then I'll get into the specifics of our 2022 cohort applications. I don't want to spend too much time on those first four things because I want to reserve the bulk of our time for answering all of your questions. Our Q&A is open. Feel free, as I'm doing the presentation, to put any questions you can in there. We'll open up the chat once we open up for Q&A after the presentation. And my colleague, our Director of Operations, Claudia Vilardi, will be answering whatever questions they can. Thank you so much, Claudia, for helping set this up with the technical assistance. Really appreciate you. Shout out to Claudia. Okay, so legal apprenticeship used to be the main way that folks became lawyers in the United States. Historically speaking, people would study the law or read the law, and that was the primary path to law licensing. That is until about 1863-ish, when the Emancipation Proclamation goes into effect. Why I highlight that date is because after the Emancipation Proclamation, there is an increase in the number of formerly enslaved people and immigrants who start seeking the apprenticeship path to become lawyers. And around about a decade or so after the Emancipation Proclamation goes into effect, the need for standards arises, and the American Bar Association is founded to make and uphold those standards. Over time, after the founding of the American Bar Association, law school becomes the main avenue towards law licensing, and the bar exam is formalized. But before that time, the bar exam was more of an oral test. I remember one story out of New York that basically said you can become the requisite to become a licensed attorney there at one point in time was not only that you would deliver a legal oration, but that you had to do it drunk. And for those of us who went to law school, not too much has changed, unfortunately. But that is kind of how the law was then. It was, you learned from other lawyers. There were all the bar associations were more like social clubs. The bar exam was oral. And now we've got in California, at least a 2-day written test, and several other standards that have made the law, unfortunately, more expensive and more exclusive. So today, the average law school student takes on about $100,000 in debt. As I went to law school, as I mentioned, and I got scholarships. And even with scholarships, I ended up with $150,000 in negatively amortizing debt. So it's been about 10 years since I graduated, and that 150 is now closer to about 300,000. Luckily, I am enrolled in public service loan forgiveness and don't plan to pay a dime on those loans. But if you aren't able to take on the government grants that you need for public service loan forgiveness, say, for example, if you identify as undocumented, then all of that comes in the form of private debt, which can be really predatory. So law school itself has become really, really expensive, especially over the last 30 or 40 years. And in law school, Black students make up only about 8% of all law students and 5% of people in the legal profession, compared to 13.4% of the US population. This is the same or similar for other groups of color, for Latinx people, really underrepresented in law schools, Asian people, indigenous folks. And it's the opposite is true for white people, who only make up about 60% of the US population, but 86% of the legal profession. According to the American Bar Association, so they have the stats on race, but then according to the ABA, there are not enough women of color in the legal profession to have statistically significant data on women of color in the legal profession. So we've got a legal educational system that is expensive and exclusive. We've got people of color and low-income people really underrepresented in the legal profession. Across the nation, there is fewer than one attorney for every 10,000 low-income people in civil courts. And the law, the culmination of these things mean that the law tends to work against and not for low-income people of color. If you identify as a low-income person of color, that's not news to you. The law rarely works to our advantage. And so, legal apprenticeship offers a really possible, really viable solution to a lot of these issues. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that system looks like today. California is one of 4 states that offers legal apprenticeship as a complete alternative to law school. California, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington are those 4 states. And then a few others have some combination of law school and apprenticeship. I think New York is starting to a model of 2 years in law school and 1 year of practical training, and then one can sit for the California bar. But for whatever reason, it used to be the main way all 50 states had that path, but for whatever reason, these are the only 4 remaining. I'm going to talk about the California Law Office Study Program, but just first a caveat. We're going to do a longer, different webinar on the ins and outs and requirements of the Law Office Study Program. I think if we focused on that now, it would take up all of our time, but I'll just do the basics here, and then hopefully we'll be able to answer more extensive questions about the actual program model in a subsequent webinar. But basically, if you fulfill the educational prerequisites for the California Law Office Program, then you can register for the Law Office Study Program, is what it's called, but also known as legal apprenticeship, and become sit for the California bar after 4 years of study. So the educational prerequisite is 60 semester units or 90 quarter units, or the demonstrated educational equivalent. So that means technically, if you have a high school diploma, you can take equivalency tests to meet that 60 semester or 90 credit unit requirement and fulfill the prerequisite and start apprenticing to become a lawyer, which is really cool, and why I wanted to highlight that legal apprenticeship can be a really cool answer to the exclusive and expensive legal educational system that we have before us today. You can technically go right out of high school. The program requires first that you get a supervising attorney, and I can talk about that a little bit more later, and that once you have a supervising attorney, that you work 4 years part-time study in a law office or a judge's chambers. So that's about 18 hours per week that's required. Your supervising attorney is required to do 5 hours of direct supervision, and then the other 13 hours can be independent study in the law office, not necessarily under direct supervision of your supervising attorney. The bar also requires monthly tests, which are submitted biannually every 6 months to the bar. At the end of your first year, you have to take and pass the baby bar, which is a smaller version of the bar exam. And then if you do the monthly test, pass the baby bars, to fulfill all the requirements of study over 4 years, at the end of your 4th year, you can sit for the California bar exam and become a licensed California attorney. I added a little caveat here about moral character. I'll just say that to mention that a part of becoming attorney in California is that you have to both pass the bar and pass a moral character evaluation. We'll probably have to do a whole separate webinar about what moral character is and how that evaluation is process, but suffice it to say, it's not actually an indicator of whether you're going to be an upright attorney at all. A lot of the people, if you look at the ABA magazine or the California magazine, and in the back, they usually have who's been suspended or disbarred. All of those people pass moral character at some point. So there's not really that correlation there. My background is in reentry legal services. So that's something I'm happy to talk about with folks. And like I said, might be the subject of a future webinar. But those are basically the requirements of California's Law Office Study Program, 4 years of part-time study, and then you can sit for the California bar and become a licensed attorney. Unfortunately, the legal apprenticeship path is not very well known. We absolutely stand on the shoulders of giants. That pictured there is Cesar Chavez, who started an apprenticeship pathway with United Farm Workers back in the 70s. And they had 2 apprentices a year. I think they still are hosting 2 apprentices a year who are the children of farm workers to do ag law on behalf of farm workers. So we absolutely stand on the shoulders of giants with our work. The difference with ESQ Apprentice is that we focus on low-income women of color, and we do that in an urban context, making us the first program of our kind. So ESQ Apprentice responds to a lot of that history that I laid out for you. We know that it's not a well-known path, so a lot of our work is having sessions like this, getting more information about apprenticeship and equipping folks with the tools they need to pursue apprenticeship on their own and within our program. Those were the structural issues. I developed ESQ Apprentice in response to the more personal and professional issues that I was going through at the time of founding. Well, so personally, I was failing a lot when I founded ESQ Apprentice. I failed the California bar 3 times before passing on my 4th attempt. When I was going through it, it was very difficult. What I know now is that's kind of by design. That's what should have happened considering who I am and the kind of lawyer I wanted to be. So I was failing the California bar, despite the fact that I had started California's first juvenile record sealing clinic, despite the fact that I had authored law legislation that became law, eliminating fees for juvenile record sealing throughout the entire state of California, despite the fact that I was doing a lot of the things that lawyers do, I was not able to pass this test. And one day I was at my clinic and bumped into a student and got to talking and asked that student where they went to law school. And they said, "Oh, I'm not going to law school. I'm apprenticing to become a lawyer." And I was like, "What's that?" And they were like, "Oh, they told me kind of the basics of the program." I went home that night and looked it up and said, that's the answer. It was like the clouds parted, lightning struck, and ESQ Apprentice was born. And now we've grown into an organization really dedicated to expanding economic opportunities for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income women of color. That definition is expansive, by the way. Anyone who's had a lived experience as a woman, trans, non-binary sisters, gender expansive sisters, we welcome all. We want to expand economic opportunities for low-income women of color, their families, and their communities by helping them complete legal apprenticeship programs in the states that offer them, and create more opportunities by advocating for apprenticeship programs in more states. So you're going to hear about our program right now, which is restricted to low-income women of color in the Bay Area, but it is absolutely our goal over time to expand to the 3 other states, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington, that offer legal apprenticeship, and then advocate for more apprenticeship programs throughout the nation, getting back to that norm of legal apprenticeship as a path nationally. We really do this work because we envision a world where economic opportunity and law licenses are available to all people, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, or gender. So for our 2022 cohort application, we are looking for 4 to 8 low-income women of color to join our ESQ Apprentice family. That may seem like a small number, but we keep our number small because we want to be really intentional about investing resources and providing the resources needed to make it through 4 years of part-time study. 4 years is an extremely long time, especially if you're living in poverty, which tends to attack on a daily, all the time, never lift up the brakes. And so we really want to be responsive and knowledge of the history of the legal educational system and how inaccessible it can be. We try to really overload resources so that our apprentices have a higher likelihood of success. As I mentioned, you're eligible if you identify as Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income women of color, and if you're based in the Bay Area, and really if you have a passion for the law and learning, and a real desire to become a licensed attorney. I've also included on this slide for supervising attorneys the eligibility requirements from the California Bar, and those are being continuously active with the California Bar for the last 5 years. There are some equity issues with this piece that we are working on getting a policy change for, including that a lot of parents go inactive in order to raise their children and then come back on board. But for now, that's the rule that we have to adhere to, that the lawyer be continuously active with the California Bar for the past 5 years. Lawyers are restricted to supervising 2 apprentices at a time. So if you're an attorney who's interested in joining our program and you're already supervising 2 apprentices, unfortunately, you can't supervise anymore. Another thing we're working on changing. But if you're an attorney who's interested, who's never supervised an apprentice, you can supervise up to 2. And that's something to think about as you organize how apprenticeship and apprentices could be beneficial to your law practice. We also ask that attorneys be based in the Bay Area. And as I mentioned earlier, the amount of supervision required for supervising attorneys is 5 hours of direct supervision a week. Now, of course, the definition of direct supervision is super vague, as so many of our laws, and up to interpretation. But I imagine that direct supervision involves excuse me, anytime that you're reviewing student work product, anytime that you are meeting with apprentices, any client intakes that the apprentice has to go in and check with you on before completing, all of those things count as within that 5 hours of direct supervision. And so you can imagine if someone's working at least 18 hours in the law office, that those kinds of things might happen naturally, and wouldn't add too much of a burden to either party. So as I mentioned, we're looking for 4 to 8 members to join our family. The timeline is listed there. We have applications open for another couple of weeks. We will close out applications and Black History Month on February 28th of this month. Then we'll take March to early April to review applications, including any interviews that we have to conduct. And then by late April, we hope to announce the new cohort and hope that the new cohort will get started in May of 2022. Our application is available on our website. I imagine many of you have been there, and that may be how you heard about the webinar today. But applications are available on our website. You cannot save your applications as you go. So I highly, highly recommend that you get the preview questions that are linked on the website under our 2022 application cohort application page. Get the preview questions and fill it out on Google Drive, Microsoft Word, whatever tool you use to answer and do your writing. And then you can copy and paste it into your application and submit. This will give you a chance to hold on to your answers. And in case something technical goes wrong with the application, it doesn't submit properly, then you won't lose all of your work. So remember, you cannot save the application. Please do write out in advance and then add copy and paste it into the application. I'll say too that the character limits are a maximum. It's not a challenge, so you don't have to fulfill all of the character limits unless that's a space you need to tell us about your wonderful and unique selves. If your answers are brief, that's fine as well. We just want to make sure that we leave plenty of space for you all to tell your story. And as we're reading about your story, there's a few things that we're looking for. We're looking to see if we can tell from what you've included in your application, if you're thinking critically and asking questions about the legal system, about the status quo, about your relationship to both. We want to see evidence that you can work independently. The law office study program or legal apprenticeship requires a lot of independent study, but also work within a cohort. We, like I said, are a family at ESQ Apprentice. And when you're in year 2 and your child's IEP is not being honored and one of your part-time jobs fell off and your mom got sick, it's really going to be your sisters in the program who come through for you every single time and keep you pushing towards your goal. So we want to know that you can work with other women and thrive with other women and work independently. We are going to be looking at your application to determine how effectively you communicate your story. Have you told it in a way that helps us understand who you are? And we're really going to be looking for passion. Like I said, 4 years is a long time, and it's going to be, in addition to your ESQ fam, it's going to be your determination and dedication, your passion for wanting to get this law license that's going to keep you in the game and thriving. Okay, so that's broad overview of apprenticeship, of our program, of the application. I want to reserve the bulk of our time for questions, and I see there are some questions in the Q&A. Thank you so much for attending the webinar, and let me just open these up and see. So the first question, do you need to work at a law office or judge's chambers while being in this program? And the answer is yes. So that's a state bar of California requirement that you work 18 hours in a law office or judge's chambers. What ESQ Apprentice helps you do is first find an attorney, a supervising attorney, and then second, we try to help you move from, well, I'll tell a story, that's a better way to do it. So we had one apprentice who came to our program working 3 part-time jobs. Within about 6 months of starting the program, we helped that apprentice find a supervising attorney, move to 1 full-time job in a public defender's office with that supervising attorney as a paralegal. And in the 2 years since she's been in the program, she's moved from paralegal to senior legal assistant and kind of that lockstep government process. So that's one of our bigger success stories, but that's something that we help folks who get in our program, we help them out with. After we pass the California bar, can we practice law in other states as long as we pass the bar of those states? Yeah, so whether you're an apprentice or not, California does not have reciprocity with other states, which means that once you're licensed in California, you'll still need to take the bar of other states in order to practice there. If you're doing some federal legal work, then you can get special licensing to work federally throughout the nation. And unfortunately, that's the one key difference with the apprenticeship path versus the law school path. You can usually, if you graduate law school and become a licensed attorney, you can waive into the Washington, D.C. bar. The Washington, D.C. bar requires a JD. So if you become a licensed attorney via the apprenticeship path, you can't necessarily study in Washington, D.C. Oh, okay, that's the only difference, but yeah. Okay, and let me close this screen actually so I can see. Wonderful. Okay, the Q&A a little better. Okay, what are the costs associated with the apprenticeship program? That's a great question, and the answer is none. It's free. So I think you saw in the presentation that law school being expensive is one of the reasons that people like me aren't able to access it. So not only is our program free for everyone who's enrolled, but we also offer a stipend, an annual stipend of about $8,000 distributed quarterly throughout the year, so that people don't have to make what I think is a false choice between education and employment as they do this work. Okay. How do I define the Bay Area? Okay, this one might get a little contentious of all the questions so far. For our purposes, we're sticking to East Bay, San Francisco area. I know some folks go down as far as Fresno. No offense to Fresno, but we're not there yet. As I mentioned, over time, hopefully in the next 2 to 5 years, we'll be expanding our program to other urban hubs, LA, maybe a Fresno, a Bakersfield, all these other dense population spaces with lots of low income folks of color who want to become attorneys. But for now, we stick to the San Francisco Bay Area, so East Bay, San Francisco. Okay, another question about cost free. Again, I'll say that a few times because it matters so much. It's the one thing that when I was going through this program and paying $1,000 every time I had to take the bar exam on top of the $150,000 in debt that I had amassed in addition to my scholarship just to go to law school, it made it so clear to me that they didn't want people like me to be lawyers. And ESQ Apprentice does want people like you to be lawyers. So we'll go, it is a free program. So I had a question here about transcripts. And that's something, if you join the program, we'll work with. We spend the first 3 months doing a deep dive into looking at some older cases, some critical race theory, learning about who we are in relationship to the law, and also registering officially with the Law Office Study Program. Transcripts do have to be official transcripts. So if that's going to take time, that's something you might want to get going, and then you'll have to mail them directly to the bar. But again, we cover all that with the new class starting in May. This is a great question about whether we're paired with a supervising attorney or have to find one on our own. We have a few supervising attorneys, some of whom might be on this call. Hello and welcome. We have a few who we've worked with who are open to working with apprentices, and we'll try to match based on interest, location, etc. I find often that if someone has attorneys in their networks at all, so if you are a paralegal or a legal assistant and you work in a law firm, that's usually a really good place to start looking for a supervising attorney, because what it means is that you already have a setup, you're already working and getting paid, and then it's about educating that firm, that attorney, about making the law office more accessible, about opening up for you and providing time for you to study for the requisites that the California bar has. So it's a combination of those two things, depending on where you are. But that's the number one thing we work with you, or one of the things we work with you to do, because our first retreat was this now 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. My question to the apprentices was, how many of you know a woman of color lawyer? And they all raised their hands. And then I said, other than me, and every hand went down. Oh, actually, one person said Felicia Rashad from The Cosby Show. And that's a character. That's not a real attorney. So we don't expect that you would have lawyers in your network, because the reality of our legal system is that if you identify as a woman of color and low income, then you don't have ready access to legal representation. But that's something we work with you on. Oh, this is a good question. Are we looking for people who specialize in a particular area of law? No. So I'm a firm believer that the arc of injustice is very long, and we need lawyers on all cylinders. Some of our apprentices are interested in public defense work, like I mentioned, criminal law. Some are interested in housing. Some are interested in business law, specifically like how can we get more people of color into weed businesses. One of our apprentices wants to be a death doula and help people navigate the end of life transition and handle estate planning in that transition at the end of life. So it really is where your passions take you. And then ESQ Apprentice will work to introduce you to different areas you might not have been aware of. But it's about your passion. And I think that that's really key, because if you're not passionate about the area of law you're working in, you're less likely to retain or continue working as a lawyer at all. So we really want to try to match passions wherever we can. And let me know if I'm talking too quickly or going too fast. But I'm getting these right off of the Q&A, so thanks for sending them in. How are people who go through legal apprenticeship treated? Oh, this is a really good question. And I'll start by telling you a story. So I did my area of specialty before I founded ESQ Apprentice. I was doing reproductive justice work, specifically reentry legal services for women and youth. So I would go get a case that had already been through the criminal system. And then on the back end, this person wanted to get licensing to turn their life around, to get a home, to get a job, these sorts of things, but their records were getting in the way. So I helped folks clean up their records. I went into court and I don't remember a single time where someone referred to me as the lawyer. They asked if I was the client. They asked if I was assisting a lawyer, if I was a law student. I got a lot of questions. I would sit there, they'd assume I was a family member, for example, and I'd listen as the judge sometimes, and the bailiff would make jokes about how to pronounce people's names and really ridicule the clients before they got into the courtroom. So I would say, as far as I know, apprentices tend to do just as well reputationally, if not better. The employers I've spoken with have said the practical training piece is really what a lot of law schools are missing, so that when you get that practical on the job training as an apprentice, it actually makes you a better asset to the lawyers you're working with. But with that in mind, there's some things, even a $150,000 legal education and a license can't change depending on who you are. Okay. I still apply if I am. So particular questions about demographically how to split, let's follow up later. I'm not sure if I understand. I'm looking at Francesca's question, if I understand the question, but we're open to Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income women of color. So if you haven't had a lived experience as a woman of color, then this is probably not the program for you. But I'm happy to again, like we have references on our website for the law office study program in general and how to go about registering. Okay, and I see a question in the chat as well. Do you need to have experience with legal writing? So it helps, but again, the way that the system works, there's no reason that you would have experience with legal writing. I mentioned the first 3 months is kind of an intensive training for our apprentices that are selected. And we cover legal writing in that, from the basic structure of a memo, IRAC form. I don't know if there are any lawyers on, you can kind of either roll your eyes or celebrate depending on your relationship with IRAC, but we teach you how to spot legal issues, how to memorize rules, how to do analysis of the law and conclusion. That's a lawyer's bread and butter, is legal analysis. And we help you do those things both by reviewing cases and by practicing actual essays and memos. For the bar exam, you've got to have a certain structure down pat. And so we tend to put our curriculum with an outsized focus on the bar, because as I mentioned, the bar is not really a test of whether you're going to be a good lawyer or not. It's more a test of whether you can take a test like white men have taken for generations. And that's pretty hard to do if you haven't been a white man for generations. So we help you with that. It's not a requirement, but it's definitely, if you do, it'll be something we'll call on you to help support your sisters with if they struggle there. Okay, a typical day in the life of an apprentice. It looks a lot like, depending on whether you're in having time with me or in the law office, we'll just do a law office day. You'd go into your law office. If you have a job at the law office, like I said, as a paralegal, legal assistant, anything in the legal field, you would do your job. And then certain hours would be blocked out for study. So 18 hours a week can look like a lot of different things. It can mean you're working full time. and then you take a couple of hours each day to review what you need for the baby bar. It can mean that you are working and incorporating your study. It can have a lot of different views, but it basically looks like going into an office, and that might be remote with COVID these days, but going into your law office, whether it's in person or remote, and then doing the assignments for the day and marking out some time for study. And that's why we look for in the applications folks who can work independently, because a lot of that scheduling on your day-to-day is going to be up to you. And we'll have some models and we'll try to hold each other accountable. But in the end, it's going to have to be you driving yourself to do that studying, the requisite for the week. And the way that it is tested on the actual application, the biannual packet that you'll submit to the California Bar, that is that your attorney will sign an affidavit saying that I swear under penalty of perjury that my apprentice has studied 18 hours a week. They'll do the total hours. I think it's like 2,000 or something like that. So many hours in my office, and then they sign off on it. We'll help you track those hours to make sure that you're keeping good track of the studying you're doing. But yeah, the days can vary, but it basically looks like doing the legal work your supervising attorney has for you, and then parsing in time to study and review with your supervising attorney. I'm seeing one question in the chat that might be related. So it's the 18-hour week, the work experience, the requirements, or the time it will take to study and do coursework. So the 18 hours a week is supposed to be for studying. So in addition to I'll say it this way, it's supposed to be for studying, much like the requirement that your supervising attorney provide direct supervision. It's really vague. There's not really clarity on what that means. So a lot of that we leave to the supervising attorney and the apprentice to work out for themselves, because it'll be them, the supervising attorney, ultimately that signs off on it. But we give a lot of guidance in that regard. Okay. Are apprentices able to work full-time during the apprenticeship? You can do full-time work in addition to apprenticing. The best apprenticeships are the ones that are full-time work, including apprenticing, if that makes sense. I think it is really difficult to balance a full-time job in addition to 18 hours in a law office or judge's chamber. So to the extent that we can combine those, I think it's better for your own mental health and well-being, especially the majority of women in our program are moms. And shout out to all the pandemic parents out there. My two little ones are deceptively quiet right now, but we would normally have like a rush through, a knock, a scream. If you're a parent, especially now, there's no time to waste. There's no energy to waste. There might not be any energy at all. So to the extent that we can combine those things and really bring them together, we're going to try to do so. Exams and assignments. So what do exams and assignments look like is the question. Really, you can go to the California Bar website and look at the law office study program, or I'll say this, the first year law student examination, I'll type it in the chat, is the abbreviation for it. And that stands for first year law student examination. So those are some of the tests that are going to be some of the essay questions that are going to be asked on the baby bar. They have sample questions there from the first year law student exam. You'll notice it's called the first year law student exam because law students who are at unaccredited institutions or who do not do well at their accredited institutions in the first year have to take the test too. So there's several examples of the test and sample essay questions and answers in addition to the first year law student exam with a baby bar. You'll also be doing multiple choice questions. So, and there we have examples of that. Adaptabar is a place, I'll type that in the chat as well for people who are doing this on their own. Adaptabar is a place where you can buy a subscription for, I'm not sure how much it is. It might be like $400 annually, but you get the subscription And what you can do with that is get practice questions. For those who join our program, we cover those expenses. We do the prep, the essays, the answers, review, and everything you'll need to get ready for the baby bar. Does the apprenticeship have to find an apprentice? I'm not sure if I understand the question. I think it might be similar to the earlier question about finding a supervising attorney. And if you're in our program, we'll help you with that. If you're not, yeah, you are going to have to find a supervising attorney, a place you can go to start looking. I'm just going to take a break. I've been talking a lot. So the place where you can go to start looking is the California Bar website. There's an attorney search function there. And I think you can search by subject area or the area of law the attorney practices, by location, etc. And that's usually a good place to get going. Income requirements. You said low income. Can you give an example? Also, what does an assessment test look like? I'm not sure about an assessment test. Our income requirements are self-reported at this time. So we tend to look at how people describe their own situation. It's difficult to have a hard and fast number like the government because, for example, I think it takes about $90,000 a year for someone to live comfortably in the Bay Area these days. So, and the government, the poverty line for a family of, I want to say for a single person is close to like 12,000. A family of four might be like 30 or 40. So we know that income alone is not an indicator of whether you're actually living in impoverished circumstances or the struggle of living paycheck to paycheck. But we work on that with the apprentices and have folks self-report what low income means to them. I think that's an application question as well. I don't know if that answers your question. Does based in the Bay Area mean as long as you have a mailing address there, or do you have to have a residence there? Again, this is as working with your supervising attorney, it's going to be good to be based in the Bay Area. I know a lot of folks had asked, what if I'll move? What if I commute? Again, we hope to expand the program one day, but we've found kind of the hard way that a very long commute is just going to inhibit your ability to be able to do the job of your law job and to get in the office and study. Some stuff is remote. Maybe we'll move there all remote one day, but as long as we have a possibility that we're going to be back in person, we really do prefer that folks already be in the Bay Area, not planning to move, but in the Bay Area. Okay. So someone who's living, who's had a long time in the Bay Area, but planning to move, able to apply. Again, love that you have a connection to the Bay Area and sorry to see you go. We know so many have to, but we really want to keep our attendance in the Bay Area, and over time, join our mailing list and stay tuned because eventually we're going to be in every major city in California and throughout the nation. Just going to speak that into existence. But for now, we're restricted to the Bay Area. Oh, thank you, Claudia, about the equivalency testing. Those are the CLEPs, the college level equivalency proctor. I don't know what the P stands for. But yes, you have to look carefully at the units that are required, but technically with the high school diploma, if upon passing these CLEP tests, I think you might have to take 4 to 6 of them, then you can be eligible to start studying to start the law office study program. Some of the biggest challenges to finishing the program, good question. And then we'll do about maybe 10 more minutes before I let you all go. What I think is that the biggest challenges in my experience don't come from the reading or the writing. Everyone who is admitted to our program, even if they have no experience with it, they'll learn. They will pick it up. We will support you. You will get there. The biggest issue, especially for people living in poverty, is maintaining the study, maintaining the program throughout all 4 years, because it can be really difficult, especially if you're a parent. It's just like a lot of us are living just one thing away. Here come the kids. Just one thing away. So we really try to, in a nutshell, poverty is one of the biggest blocks to continuing. I think secondary would be like passing the actual exams. I had my own troubles, as I mentioned, passing the California bar, but what I can say honestly now is that failing 3 times before passing on the 4th time has made me so intimate with that test. And I'm so excited to make sure that anyone who comes up after me doesn't fall into the same pitfalls that I fell into while taking it. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so this one's asking for more clarification about what folks have to do on their own and what ESQ Apprentice helps with. So the actual study is what you have to do on your own. Taking the baby bar, tracking your hours, all of those things you do on your own, like talking to your supervising attorney. We hope to provide some help if communication with the supervising attorney gets terse or isn't clear at any point. We step in and help with that. What ESQ Apprentice provides, in addition to a community to love and support you through this process, is a stipend support, so that you get, in addition to whatever you make doing your law office study or your law job, we provide stipend support. We provide assistance and curriculum around the baby bar and the bar exams. We provide kind of the nuts and bolts of legal reading and writing. We provide mentorship. We provide, did I say love? Love is a big part of it. Lots of love. We will help with matching with a supervising attorney if that's not something you already have in mind or are working towards. We don't have all of our a textbook per se, but we provide all of the study materials, access to different cases. There's books that we use that we make available freely to our apprentices. Yeah, we try to do, basically, if you were doing this on your own with the California bar, you would have to file your registration on your own, pay your registration fees on your own, find your supervising attorney on your own, study for the baby bar and lay out your curriculum for how you're going to study on your own, take the baby bar and pay for it on your own. Continue study, switch supervising attorneys if you need to do that at any point on your own. And a lot of that administrative burden and all of that stuff that you'd have to do on your own outside of our program is what we try to take care of, so that it's not yet another barrier to being able to complete the program and become a licensed attorney. Okay, yeah, no textbooks need to be purchased. Although I would love to work on one, and then maybe it'd be free for apprentices, but get it out there and get some revenue going for the org. How many women have successfully completed the legal apprenticeship program? So we have 5 young women currently enrolled, 2 of whom are preparing for the baby bar in June. Cross your fingers for them. So no one's completed the program yet and passed to become a lawyer. 2 of our board members have, and they provide a lot of insight on always how we're doing the program, how we're helping folks access the information. We have been taking on apprentices for about 3 years now. And then there's been, I won't get into the weeds about all the ways that we have learned that people like us are not really, there's not a clear path for us to become lawyers. But what I will say is that working through those obstacles has made ESQ Apprentice singularly prepared to get folks through this program. And I'm so excited to bring more people on board and get them on this path. Okay, what are the passing rates for the bar exam? I would say it depends on who you are. For people of color, well, I think in general, the last couple of exams, I want to say it's right around 50%, if not less than a majority who pass the bar. And then for people of color, it's less than a majority almost across the board. It's not, California and New York are historically the most difficult bar exams to pass. And in California, that's especially true for people of color. So about 50-50. It usually stays right around there. Sometimes it goes up to 60, 64. Sometimes it goes down to 48. Okay. We have got 6 more questions, and I think we might make it through if I talk quick. Okay. Do you stay with one supervising attorney the whole 4 years, or do you have different supervising attorneys? Great question. You can stay with one supervising attorney all 4 years. I have not quite seen that happen for various reasons. I like to encourage people to rotate to be with different supervising attorneys. You just have to file documentation with the bar to show that you didn't have a break in your study, and the new supervising attorney has to sign an affidavit that says they're supervising you. So it's fairly simple to transfer supervising attorneys. I wouldn't recommend doing it too often. But once you have a supervising attorney, I usually encourage people to try it for 6 months to a year and then explore a different area of law, because you don't know what you like until you know what you like. Unless you're one of those people who's just like, no, I'm just going to be a criminal lawyer, in which case well, you can stay with one attorney that whole time if you know exactly what you're going to do. Is there a combination of office hours versus online or virtual work? So again, this will be for you and your supervising attorney to figure out what constitutes the law office, because they're going to have to sign a document that says this person came into the law office. A lot of the attorneys I know, the law office is virtual right now because of the pandemic. So whatever, if you're a supervising attorney is comfortable in signing off on that, then that's the way to go. Usually, historically, you'd have to go into the office, but the supervising attorney could still supervise virtually. Like if you were to write a memo and then email them and then they wrote comments on the memo, like that's technically could qualify as direct supervision. Okay. How are supervising attorneys assigned to the apprentices? Is it dependent on the area of law? I said a little bit about this earlier. We try to match based on interest, location, a few other things, pre-existing relationship, proximity, like it's based on the interests. And then at the same time, if there isn't a supervising attorney for your niche, we try to get you enrolled in the program and just studying so you can learn about different areas of the law as soon as possible. Okay, can you be an executive assistant to an executive director of a law firm? Does the job title matter? The title does not matter so much as whether your supervising attorney has agreed to supervise you and provide 5 hours of direct supervision. So you can be a legal assistant, you can be an administrative assistant in a law office, and then that might look like talking to other attorneys in the law office, telling them what you're interested in, and then going from there. One of our board members was I think he started as an administrative assistant and then promoted to a paralegal, but came in and as an administrative assistant said, I want to become a lawyer. The law office was really invested in raising up a lawyer in-house. So they invested in him. They put their support behind him for 4 years under different attorneys in his law office. And now he's a licensed attorney in California and sits on our board, Micah Clatterbow. So the title does not matter. Okay, 2 more. I think we're going to make it. It's hard to find apprenticeships. Doing research on your own is going to take some time. Okay, so are there other apprenticeship programs across California with similar mission statements and shared values? I mentioned the United Farm Workers. To my knowledge, that's still restricted to the children of farm workers, and you have to do agricultural law when you finish. But other than the program, Cesar Chavez started there in our program. There are a few places where apprentices are hosted. So like the Sustainable Economies Law Center, based out of Oakland, for example, has apprentices working there. One of our apprentices is at the East Bay Community Law Center. We're trying to do the work to get more, especially nonprofit law offices, but also solo and small practitioners to take on apprentices and create apprenticeship paths in firms. But in terms of people who will just get the resources, pay the fees, help you through this, be your sisterhood along the way, we're one of a kind, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll be expanding and franchising this model. Is it possible to take more than 4 years? Our last question. Yes, it's possible and actually pretty normal to take about 4 to 6 years. 4 years is the ideal. 4 years is I register without a problem. I finish all my study and find a supervising attorney with no issue. I pass the baby bar the first time. You get 3 attempts to pass the baby bar before you have to start over. I finish all my study and then I pass the bar exam right when I set out. That's what happens in 4 years. It's rare that all of that happens without any hiccups. So that can extend. The baby bar and the bar exam are only offered twice a year. So if you fail one, you got to wait 6 months before taking the other, and that can extend the time. So it's normal to take 4 to 6 years. ESQ Apprentice stands with you the whole time. Once you're part of our family, you're part of our family, and that don't change. So we ride or die with you. Okay. So I think expansion, same model, or maybe, oh, okay. So this is the last question. Can we have a program for men of color in the future? If it were up to me, we'd have programs for all of us. Our vision is a world where everyone, men, women, low-income folks, people of color, can access the law and thrive as lawyers. So one day, yeah, that might be the case because of who I am, because of our principles rooted in reproductive justice and Black liberation. We're focusing on low-income women of color now, but I can imagine a world in the not too distant future where we also have programs for men of color, and you might be the one to create it. We might end up working together at some point in the future, but I'm definitely hopeful that we can spread enough information and get enough people knowledgeable about this program so all my folks can access it readily. All righty. Can I just give us a pat on the back? We have answered 45 questions almost today. You all are an inquisitive bunch and I love it. You're thinking critically about this, about how it can factor into your life. I can already tell just from the comments, I can't see any of you, but I know you're starting to imagine, ooh, what would my life be like with the law? Ooh, and if I actually had the support? I'd be the most awesome lawyer. I work for my people. I'd stay in my community. I would change the world. And that's exactly the energy and the fire we want you to bring into your applications, available on our website. Visit us, join our mailing list as we expand and grow over time and get more resources to support this work. We're going to definitely want to keep you posted so that as many of you as possible can pursue this path as you're able. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Enjoy your weekend. Happy Black History Month. And please, please, please continue to stay safe and healthy. I'm so glad each one of you is here. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, y'all. So take care of yourselves and your loved ones.